All right, hello. Welcome to the February 15th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can submit questions in advance by emailing to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you can simply ask the questions in the chat field. So as we kind of go through the questions, my ability to answer questions in real time will soon be lost, but I'll try my best to catch up. I'm going to do a quick audio test here. First, make sure everything is coming through. All right, everything is good. So I will try to catch up, and we'll try to go through all the questions as completely and as succinctly as possible. In order. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, please if we could refrain from asking the question repeatedly over and over again, that would be appreciated. It just kind of slows down the whole process. So after the live stream tonight, several hours after, we will have an index pinned to the top of the comments field. So that way we can just actually see all the different topics that will be covered with timestamps. If you wanted to search for topics covered in previous live streams, you can find it at cubaseindex.com, and Jan from Stockholm has been kind enough to compile that as a website. So it allows you to search through, it's probably about 16,000 topics we've covered since kind of the pandemic started a little under 2 years ago, since we kind of ramped up the live streams. So special thanks to Jan for that. We have two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. So they're not Steinberg employees. They just do this to help the community and make it a better environment for everyone. So special thanks to them. One other great resource of information that people should check out, in addition to all the official Steinberg resources, is going to be the Cubase Nation Discord. And Jazz Dude does a lot with that, so I want to give special thanks. Sorry, I was just a minute late. I was just on a meeting with Tom Hulkenberg, so I left the meeting early so I could do this. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the questions. All right, so we have we see Jazz Dudes on. We have Benny from Sweden. We have Nick, who I believe is in Essex in UK. We have Stefan from Sweden. Sable Winters. All right, so we have Mitch Michelle from Michigan. Uno Memento from Finland. All right, Trance 2020 from Berkshire, UK. We have Brian Sawyers. Great to see you on from Beulahville, North Carolina. Matt Elston checking in from London. All right, so we have a question from Taylor Sapp. Is it possible to use more than one scale temperament in the same project? Can temperament or her mode tuning be changed for one instrument while leaving the others in equal temperament? So I think that if we wanted to do this, I'll just show. So yeah, you can have some tracks in equal temperament while others aren't. So I think I have a project to show this. So if you're not familiar with her mode tuning, what it's going to allow you to do is to take different tracks and actually have those do different tuning based on what we call the her mode tuning system. So we could have tracks here that are checked to not activate and follow the her mode tuning, and other tracks that are within the same project. So you could enable her mode tuning, and what her mode tuning is going to allow you to do, if you're knowledgeable of, and we could set this up in the project setup, is, when we do equal temperament, it's not pure tuning. It's actually going to be more of a compromise to make sure that all 12 keys are slightly out of tune through, precisely, out, or slightly out of tune, but we could have music that sounds good in all 12 keys. So that's what the her mode tuning will allow you to do, and you can set that up in a project setup. So in this case, I could have tracks at the top, and we could activate the her mode tuning on a track by track basis. So these tracks could be in equal temperament, and these tracks I could have set to be to follow her mode tuning. So, and we could have both of those going on simultaneously. All right, so we see, is there a key command to quickly select the line tool? So I think if we just kind of come over here, there may not be one, but we could probably set one. So let's take a look at our key commands. And if we just take a look under our tools, so as we come over here, let me just get the actual, make sure I have the right name. And let me just search and see if one comes up. Right, so it doesn't look like there's one listed here for the line tool, which is kind of a little shocking. I thought there would be, but let's see if I have like the mute tool, and let's say if I hit F10 to go to the next tool, that will automatically take us to that. Yeah, so you could just hit F10 to select the line tool. So if you wanted to make a macro to go to like the mute tool and then hit the next tool 3 times, you could assign it like that. But but it seems like there should be one, but I don't see it listed in the key commands. So you could, if you needed to assign one, you could create a macro to jump to this tool and then go to next tool 3 times or 2 times, however many times is needed to get to the line tool. All right, we see Michael Pierce on the live stream. All right, so we have a question. How do you add a short key to a logical editor preset? Also, thank you for the help in a logical editor. I already implemented it in my setup, and it works great. So it's a great function. So if you wanted to add a logical editor keyboard shortcut, I could now come to, you would see it under key commands. Let's get to the key commands here. And then you'll see it under process logical editor. So if we come over here alphabetically, you'll see process logical preset. And here's where we could assign keyboard shortcuts for all of the presets directly for the logical editor, directly right there. So so once again, all of the logical editor presets are going to show up under process logical preset. All right, so we have a question. Says, quick one for me. If I have a named color template set up, how do I import this into an old project? It still has color 1, 2. So I think if we just come over here, let's take a look, see if we can do that in the project color setup. A lot of times when we do this, so let's say if we have our color setup. So if you wanted to take that color setup from the particular project, you could try to store the color set as default. And then it should be able to open up that project, open up that project's color setup. So you give that a try. So go to the project menu to project colors setup and options, and then once you have the one project with the colors that you like, come over here and choose to store the color set as default, and I think that will work. All right, I just see someone saying no sound, so I'm going to just do a quick test and make sure sound is okay. Okay, so it sounds fine so far. So hopefully maybe it's sorry, let me just turn that down. Store the color set as default, and I think that will work. I just see someone saying no sound, so I'm going to just do a quick test and make sure sound is okay. Okay, so it sounds fine so far. So hopefully maybe. All right, so let me see. All right, so I'm just going to turn volume down on my monitoring computer. Sorry about that. It's a bummer to do a whole presentation answering questions if no one can hear you. So I just want to make sure that I wasn't doing that. Okay, so we have a question from Gavin Eckhart. Hi, Greg. I've been wondering why events don't snap to grid when copying, holding them down. Alt plus snap is on events and snaps when moving normally. Okay, so let's say if I wanted an event to snap to the grid, so I'll just jump back to this project here. Okay, and I'll just take this particular event off of musical mode. So, but let's say if I have this event here, and I hold down Alt, so I'm going to enable snap on the grid here. And I'll just, so as soon as I copy, so I could just kind of snap that. Let's say if I wanted to snap, so it could be like if you have your grid set to use quantize, or if you have your grid set to use bar, that as I would come over here, and so now like when I hold down the Alt key, it's going to automatically snap directly to the bar. So if you had like a group, if you have it set to use quantize, and maybe you have a groove quantize preset available there, then maybe that's, you know, could be causing it to not snap to the grid. And I'm just going to reread it. Yeah, so make sure that, you know, even though snap is on, that you have the snap, you know, the grid format set here to bar or beat as opposed to like use quantize, and see if that makes a difference. Okay, so you see, so it says, why am I unable to assign key commands to macros? It works on functions, but not on macros. So seems to work. I will come over here. Let's take a look at the macros. So if we go to key commands, I will come over here, and let's say if I wanted to trigger a macro for duplicate selected tracks without data. So let's say if I wanted to come here. So I'd go to the macro section and we'll say duplicate selected tracks without data. Find an empty key command. Okay, so if I wanted to duplicate this track, I'm going to do it with my keyboard shortcut, and we'll see if so that seemed to work. So make sure, Taylor, that you're coming over here and assigning the key command in the macros area. So as soon as I come directly to macros, all of my macros are here, and that keyboard shortcut seemed to trigger the macro. And another question from Taylor just saying, I accidentally deleted my macro for duplicating tracks without data. How can I get it back? If I use my last save profile, I'll lose many new additions to it prior to deleting the macro. So you could easily create the macro again. So let's come over here to our key commands, and we will just go to the duplicate. I think this is only like duplicate selected tracks without data. So if you wanted to recreate the macro, you wanted to go to project, duplicate tracks, automation, delete automation of selected tracks, track version, delete inactive versions of selected tracks, edit, select all on tracks, and then edit, delete. So if you wanted to recreate that macro, you could just use those 5 steps. If you never have automation or track versions, you could leave those 2 steps out. But just in case you do, you could include those. But it's just 5 steps to make a macro, and then you could just have that macro back without having to restore your profile. All right, so we have Soren from Sweden and Rudy checking in from South Africa. All right, and we see PJ from Yonkers. We have Christian from Germany. And Mono Liza Sound from Netherlands. Thanks for joining us. John Costigan. And I saw Sable Winters is on. And we have Kerwin Young. All right, so we have Mark checking in from Nairobi in East Africa. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question from Rick Ballantyne. Great to see you on the live stream. His question is there a way to assign colors in the key editor for each track when looking at all of the parts? All right, so let's say I'll just go to, and Rick is in Charlotte, North Carolina, just outside Charlotte. So let's say if I wanted to look at, so something with a lot of different track colors here. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to look at my different tracks here, and I have, different tracks for violin, and I'll just change some of these to make them a little more obvious. Okay, so if I wanted to now come here, so the question is again, assign colors in the key editor for each track when looking at all the parts. So as soon as I come over here and I want to look at all these events in the key editor, there's going to be just a color scheme here. So when we go to look at the colors, by default it may say velocity. But here I could actually just say, let's colorize by part. And now each of the parts you'll see the different colors. And as you click on one, that'll become the active part. So you say, oh, I just wanted to click on this, or I wanted to click on that voice, and that will become the active part. But just in this little, where it may say velocity here to indicate colors, just choose, you want to colorize by the part, and then you could see all the different parts colors that are derived from the project window directly here in the key editor, so you could delineate and differentiate between the different parts. All right, so we have Robbie Bowling checking in from Dallas. A loyal attendee. All right, so we see Hans is here from the start today. So we see John Costigan also on. Okay, so we have a question. Happy Valentine's, Mr. Greg, and all your students. Thank you. You had a nice time at home, so we had a nice dinner. So we see live from Finland. I wish to know, I just upgraded from Cubase 10.5 to Cubase Elements 11 using PC Windows 8.1. 64 bits. Is there Variaudio? So Variaudio isn't in the Cubase Elements version, but it is in the artist version. So so if it's going to be in Cubase Artist and Pro. So with version 11, it used to be only found in Pro, but now it's in Cubase Artist. But there is a pitch correct plugin that comes with Cubase Elements. So it's not graphic editing, but you could set a scale and have the pitch kind of comply to the scale to be more in tune. So okay, so I just see a question. Hi, can I ask how to disable the track that double click to rename button? Sometimes I use the mouse to switch track and will accidentally press it. So I don't think that there's a way to, disable double clicking to rename parts. It's kind of a standard computer thing. But most of the time, as we come here, we could just, so it's kind of a standard computer function, so if we double click that you could rename. So if you want to do that, I don't know of a way to disable Cubase from allowing you to rename parts. So all right, so we have Detlef. It's great to see you back from Dusseldorf, Germany. Okay, so we just see, hi from Toronto question, how to make a side chain between two channels when first fader going up, second down. So, generally that's not a side chain. So, side chain is generally kind of routing two different components into each other. But, if it was just going to be, so there isn't a way to kind of automatically flip or create kind of, like one fader affects the other fader. Some control surfaces offer that type of functionality, but there isn't a function that I know of in Cubase, maybe in device panels, but that could be a really complex way of doing it. But, what a lot of people do if they wanted to do something like that is, just simply, grabbing the line tool and saying, okay, this one I want up and this one I want to go down. So, it's easy enough with two mouse clicks and just kind of drawing to do inverted automation like that, but there isn't a way to have one channel that I know of that would affect like an inverted values for another channel. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, is it possible to record tempo change from an external MIDI controller in real time as if I was conducting an orchestra? So, you know, if you wanted to come, you know, we could do a tap tempo if you wanted to. So, you know, especially if you're doing a lot of audio, so it may not be kind of like the same idea as conducting. But let's say if I was wanting to do a tap tempo, we could create just an instrument track, and I'll just route this to nowhere. And then as I just record, you know, like MIDI notes here, I will just come over here, let's say as we're doing this, and I'm wanted to just place Cubase into record, and I'll just kind of hit a MIDI note here. So this doesn't control it in real time, but the end result is if I wanted to now double click here, I could see all of my MIDI notes, and I could go to MIDI, and under functions, you'll see merge tempo from tapping. So I have this part selected, and I can say, okay, I tapped in quarter notes, and now it will make a tempo map for me based on what I had tapped in. So if we add a tempo track, I could come right here and just create a tempo track based upon MIDI input, but it doesn't automatically just kind of change, you know, on the fly, because especially dealing with audio, that could be trickier to do that, to figure out what the tempo is and have the audio follow that. Okay, so we have a question, Cubase 11 Pro, how do you reverse the operation, then transfer a MIDI part to Beat Designer? Thanks so much. All right, so let's say if I have Beat Designer as a MIDI insert, I'll come over here. So if you wanted to take, sorry, my Alexa is responding. All right, so if I'm not sure if you want to, so transfer a MIDI part to the Beat Designer. So I'm not sure if we could, so let's say if I have, I don't think this would work. I know we can copy it out, but I'm not sure if we could do it in. So most people start from within Beat Designer. So let's say, so let's copy that part here. And so I didn't think that would work. So I don't think that there's a way to, you know, I think the intention of Beat Designer was to, you know, be able to kind of populate beats here, and then we could, you know, insert at the cursor. So if I just come here, I could just say, okay, let's just, you know, from Beat Designer to take it into Cubase. But most of the times, you know, people won't necessarily take it from Cubase to Beat Designer. So I don't know of a way to do that. So, but it's something I could pass on as a feature request. All right, so we see Best Korean Jesus on. Great to have you back. All right. All right, so we have a question from Sven Isaacson. I have a bunch of project files containing a MIDI tracks and an audio track of the song. The issue is that the audio and MIDI don't line up. If I play the project, the click lines up with the MIDI, but is out of sync with the audio. If I do tempo detection, the click lines line up with the audio, but it is out of sync with the MIDI. How do I get the existing MIDI parts to follow the tempo track after a tempo detection and thus play in sync to the audio? So often the only time I've come across this from someone was when they exported the audio file itself at a different frame rate or a different sample rate than what the project was set to. So it could be, so I wonder if that is kind of the issue. So let me just see if I could recreate something like that. Okay, so let's say our project here is set to 44.1. I want to go to this particular project, and I'm just going to drag, let's say, a pattern in. Okay, I'm just going to check my audio connections here real quick. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's say I have this pattern, and I'm at 44.1. And now let's say if I have this kind of locked to the grid, I could probably come over here and choose to. So I'll go to my audio mix down, and let's say I want this to be at 48K, and then we'll create an audio track. And just temporarily, I'll just blow these tracks out. Okay, so let's say now I want to export. I'll say my stereo out, but I wanted to do it at 48K. All right, so it seemed to export, but let's see if the pitch. All right, I'm just gonna check my project setup here real quick, make sure. And I'm just could be also just preference under editing to audio to automatically on import audio will open options dialog. So let's take a look. So I'm just going to export it again, just only that. So we see that now if it was exported a different sample rate, that the file would be a different length. So let's say if I do a tempo detection on this, so I think that's probably the crux of the problem. So let's say I do a tempo detection of our new file. So I'll come here. Let's say I want to do my tempo detection. So we say analyze. Okay, so we have this, and you want it. All right, so what I think, so if we come here, let's put this into musical mode. So if we put the track, so let's say if I have my tempo track activated, and let's say if I bring up the tempo of this, so all right, so so check to see, you know, so I would think that this is going to still kind of fall within. Let me just see if I put this into, you know, so I would think that this is still going to fall on the bar and beat. So check Sven to see if it's not just a sample rate. That was the exported file was a different sample rate. If you could let us know that, that would be really helpful. But I think that that could solve the problem. All right. So we just see question, is there a controller or app I can use in order to control Cubase AI 11 in my vocal booth? So I think that you could get like on Mac OS or I'm sorry, on iOS, you could check out Cubase IC Pro. What I know a lot of people do is just take a wireless keyboard and walk it into their vocal room, or, you know, or you could do kind of remote access from an iPad, something like that, and remotely look at your screen. So check that out, but IC Pro could be a great option for you as well. All right, so we see Michael Romanowski from Coast Mastering just saying hi. Thanks for joining us on the live stream. I hope you're doing well. Okay, so we see what color will the Cubase 12 desktop icon be? So it'll be whatever color it is. So we'll get to see it when it's released, would be my guess. All right. All right. So we see, can you show how to compare loudness of an example song in mixing? That would be great. All right. So let's say if we have a particular project here. So we'll just say, I'll just take this project. Make sure I don't kill everyone volume wise. You know, so if you wanted to, so if you wanted to kind of see what your meters are doing, we could come over here and see kind of, you know, if we go to our loudness meters here, so here we can see kind of our loudness of what's going on with our LUFS scale. Now, if you wanted to do it like on, you know, I'm not sure if it's for like a reference track, but if you wanted to do it on, like, you know, let's say you know, ripped a CD or you have an MP3 and you wanted to see what the loudness was on a reference track, so you could see like your mix here, but you could also just come over, select an audio file and go to your audio menu to statistics, and that will do an analysis of the file, and that will give you information on the particular file, so you can see what your loudness units are for that particular file as opposed to your mix. So let me know if that will help you with that question. All right, so Razel checking in from Denmark. All right, so we see from JVI, user request in the project window, select color for selected tracks or events. Can we have the menu back for more colors there as it always was? So let's say if I wanted to, you know, select a number of tracks here and I wanted to colorize them, we could just go to our color tool and then you could, you know, choose your colors just directly here. So if I just wanted to say, okay, let's take these tracks and I wanted to colorize the tracks all yellow or green, so whatever. And then you could always just kind of, so if you, and again, whatever colors that you have, so once you set up kind of the project colors, you could do that. And you could also just, you know, select colors directly here from your chosen color palette. So, but, you know, maybe just check out like the paint, the color tool right there. All right. All right, so we see Cedric checking in, all right, from India. All right, any updates on Cubase 12? So I'm sure it's coming. So, but nothing that we could really share at this point. So when it's out, we'll be happy to show you all the different functions. All right, so just see from Benny, did you miss my question? We just scroll back. Just seeing if I could find Benny's question from earlier, if we answered it. All right, so I just see Benny, your question of hello, Benny from Sweden here. Let me see. I'll just kind of scroll back and see if I see another question from you in the chat field. right, just reading back. Right, so Benny, I don't think I saw your question, but if you want to ask it again, please feel free to just kind of type it in. But I just saw you saying hello. Sometimes if it was asked like before the live stream starts, some of those get cut off. So sorry about that. See Cedric asking if there's a virtual pub around. So we do that the last live stream of the month. So. All right, so we see a question from Sean Rollins. Greg, can you discuss the difference between track versions and track lanes and how you might use each? Lanes are more for comping and versions are more for organization. Is that correct? Or, so after a while, I may come over and, like while I'm doing editing. So if I tend to, if I'm doing a single part, like I'm, doing overdubs of a guitar solo or overdubs of bass or vocal recordings, I would tend to do lanes. And what lanes would allow you to do is to see all of your different takes and allow you to easily kind of switch between, different takes or lanes. So you could have performance 1, performance 2, performance 3, etc. And then you could easily kind of say, I want this bit from, and I'll just show quickly in the project here. All right, so when we go to lanes, what lanes would allow you to do kind of for your editing is just to say, I want to take, and for like a single part or like, stereo part, because I want this take of that. I really like this and I want that there. So we could just come over here and pick different performances of different sections. Now, track versions, a lot of times I use them a lot for editing different things. So like I may do like if I was doing like Variaudio editing, I may just come over here and track versions. You could use them for organizations, but if I'm doing like a 24 track band project and let's say there's 16 tracks being tracked simultaneously, every time that they do a different performance, I may add like what's called a track version. So I may go ahead and come over here and say, okay, I'm going to record my audio here. So I'll just say, okay, let's just hit record. Okay, so let's say this will be take 1. Okay, so let it go for a couple measures. All right, the band wants to take another stab at it. They want to keep all of that there. So at this point, you can say new version. So we don't necessarily erase those versions, but we can say, okay, they're doing their recording. All right, and at the end they go, oh, that one feels pretty good. And I wanted to do a new version. And at this point, I could, and I don't really have to like mute and unmute different parts. We could just kind of come over here and say, okay, now we're on take 3. And it's like, oh, let's listen to take 2. So now we could just play, listen to take 2, switch to take 1 for the whole band. So if we're doing kind of multi-track switching, this is when I like to use track versions. If I've done a lot of editing on a particular event, so let's say I've come here and I painstakingly have edited, 1,000 crossfades, and I'm incredibly precise, and I've adjusted all of my gains, and I realized that later by moving one of these things that I could totally screw up all the edits that I just did. So I could come over here and just say duplicate version. So at this point, I could do something like, okay, I just want to do a bounce selection. So I'll come right over here. Let's replace the event. So let's say if I have all of these selected, I will, again, come over here to bounce selection. And now I have kind of one event. So, and let's say I wanted to duplicate this. And now I wanted to have this one for all of my Variaudio edits. So I could come right over here, and then someone's like, oh, I didn't like the edit that you did. Then I could just go back to version 1. Okay, let's bring this down. And then at that point, I could still have multiple versions of the same track without having to duplicate plugins, mixer settings, all that different stuff. And then I could just jump back to, consolidate. Okay, that's where I was before. Now I want to do this version that's doing Variaudio. So I could easily just kind of switch between different editing scenarios using track versions as well. So there is some overlap, but I like to think of track versions if I want to be more involved with, different edit decisions, as well as having the ability of working with multi-track and lanes and comping for single parts. All right. So we see question, Greg, is IC Pro essential with Cubase? It's a great utility. So one, you have transport controls. I know studios that are using it for each of the musicians has an iPad, and they could control their own headphone mixes. You could, stack different keyboard shortcuts and functions, as well as do control for different functions. So it's a great app for remote control. So if you're doing, if you wanted to set it up to like, these are my, favorite shortcuts I want to have access to, you could do that through IC Pro, or, remotely control transport if you're tracking yourself like in a vocal room. So then it's a really great solution. All right, we see David Griffith just saying the like button is fully smashed. So it's great. We appreciate that. Now it allows us to continue to offer these live streams. All right, so we see Tim Weinheimer on the live stream. Great to see you. So we see question, Dear Greg, what's the definition settings in a sample editor and how to use it? All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so when we go to our definitions for our sample editor, so as soon as I double click, we could come over here to the definition file. So as soon as we want to do this, we could come over here. One is just to kind of place things into musical mode, so we could see that we're going to have like our grid adjusted here. We could choose to kind of auto adjust to the different grids and what the grid resolution should be, like as we do editing upon, so like while we're here, if we go into audio warping, we could choose to have some of these different components that are kind of defined. So if you wanted to kind of manually adjust, you could do this in the definition tab, but otherwise, most of the time we just kind of do it using hit points, especially for warping. Okay, so we see John Koskinen says, may I please have 64 new people press the like button as a personal favor? And John is a really nice guy, so. Okay, so we just see what is the best settings for project setup? How do I set up pan law or other thing? All right, so when we look at some of our project settings, and we can do this by going to your project menu to project settings or Shift S. So some of the different things you could have. So the stereo pan law, you could have this set, I think it'll default to -3 dB. There's different scenarios here, and that could really just be how you want panning to be compensated, like as you sweep across, like a stereo track, as you sweep across from right to the left, passing through the center, that the mono sources aren't brought up. So you could compensate for that. There's also a volume max. So right now I have this set to plus 6 dB above 0. Some control surfaces offer 12 dB over 0. So if my control surface did 12 dB, I may want to have an additional 12 dB over 0 for that. We could also set the project frame rate, the project time display, so how you want the actual file, what format in time. So if you're dealing with bars and beats, or if you're in post-production and you're dealing with seconds and time code, setting your sample rate, all that information could be set here. Plus, the project ownership, so you could, put your name and your company name there. So, but, there's really no wrong settings that you can set here, but, just make sure you have the right sample rate and bit depth. And if you have a control surface that has 12 dB plus on faders, you could adjust that. Or if your control surface is set to 6 dB, or you just want, an additional 6 dB of gain, you could adjust accordingly there. See, Sean Rollins is just saying, I've only been in there for maybe a week, but it's awesome, great info. So I think he might be talking about Discord. So, okay, so we have a question. Say I have 4 vocal tracks, but I want to put them all in one track. How could I do that using AI 11? So if you're using AI 11, what you could do is, there's some other tracks that will have different like bouncing functions, but with AI versions, since you probably got it with maybe a Steinberg interface or a Yamaha product. If I wanted to quickly bounce all of my drums down together, or background vocals, I could select a number of the tracks here. And if I wanted to just solo, I'll just activate the project here quickly. So if I want to just solo the particular tracks, what you can do is an export audio mixdown. So we would say stereo out, and since the other tracks aren't soloed, they're not going to be heard. And you'll see this after export, and we could just choose to create audio track. And now we could just come right over here. We'll choose to export the audio, and it'll do it between the left and right locators. So as we do this, we'll now have a stereo mixdown file of everything that we just soloed. So it could be drums or background vocals. So solo the tracks, set the left and right locators, go to export audio mixdown, and then you should be all set. Other versions, you could do it another easier way. The more advanced versions of Cubase is utilizing render in place. So if you have a number of tracks selected, you could just mix down a number of tracks, but they'll both get you to the same destination. All right. All right, so we see I'd like to be able to change tempo in a smooth, non-linear way with Bezier curves, like we now have automation tracks. Is it possible? So I don't think the tempo tracks have Bezier curves. I mean, I don't think it really changes the end result. But let's say if we add a tempo track. So I'll just turn this on. So, I mean, you could just kind of draw in curves manually, but there isn't, I don't think that there's kind of the same curves, but generally, tempo is going to be, the relationship between two different values. So it kind of could work a little differently than, doing filter sweeps and stuff like that, and make sure that it's not necessarily just doing it for, let's say if I ramp between these two tempo values here, so like doing a Bezier curve, because tempo is going between two different points, not arching between two different points. So, if you wanted to ramp down, you could do that. But if you wanted it to actually, follow like a Bezier curve, while it may look pretty, it's really not smoother. And you should manually enter that in so that, because tempo is kind of like an absolute value. All right. So we see question. Hi, is there a way through Project Logical Editor and or macros that makes the description field name change when I change the name of the file name field for an audio event? Okay, so let's say if I record an audio file here. Okay, so we'll call this audio 01. Okay, so we have audio 1_3. So we want to be able to name this file. So I think we could do it in Nuendo, but let's say if I just call this bass. Here, I'll just call it something else. Okay, so if I name it here, we want the description to name to be updated. So I think that you could copy it here, but a lot of times within macros, like hitting tab to go to the next field doesn't necessarily work inside of a macro. So let's say if I come here and I say, okay, let's select all, copy, tab, rename. So we could do it like that. And let me just see. I don't think hitting tab is going to be an option within the macro. So, but I'll give it a quick shot. And let me see if it's, while this is selected, if we hit the, yeah, so we hit the tab key since it's not going over. So we can't do it with a macro that I know of. Let's come see if we can do it in a Project Logical Editor. So don't know a way to do that. I think if we come over here, so let's say if I hold down. So while you do this, if we like, let's say, yeah, so you might have to manually do it. So, you know, one trick that sometimes helps people, like if you wanted to rename the events, so let's say if I come here and I wanted to name, if I hold down Control or Command and then hit Enter, that would automatically rename the part from the track name. But I don't know of a way to automatically do it. But if you have the event selected, you can come here, copy, hit Tab, and paste. All right, just have a quick live stream, a quick email I got to respond to. Just give me a second. Bear with me just one moment. All right. All right, so we just see, hi Greg, few future feature requests, MIDI sends from instrument tracks and range selection in key editor. Thanks. Yeah, so I passed those on before, and I know we just had had a meeting with Ludwig Göransson's team, and they wanted the MIDI sends and instrument track, so it's a well-known thing. But I know that you could do the range selection in the in-place editor, but not the key editor. So I continue to kind of beat that drum with our developers and planning team. Okay, so we see will all or most of what's being shown work the same way for or in Nuendo 11? Yes, like 99.98% of everything I do will be applicable for Cubase for Nuendo 11 as well. All right, so you see, Greg, is there a preference to change the info line to automatically whatever I name a track? I know you can hold down Shift plus Enter to change the event name to match the track name, but for the info line, so, you know, so like, I know we're just here, so, you know, I think if it's for the description. All right, so let's say if I just I'll add an audio track and we'll call it Sean. Okay, so I record. Okay, so as you can see, if you name the track before, you know, the file name and the description will be the same. So, you know, and as you mentioned, if you wanted to, you know, change the track names here, so let's say, okay, I want to call it Sean 1111, and then hold down Control, that we could rename. And let's see, I think you mentioned Shift. So, you know, it will retain the names that you give it. So, you know, always, so maybe if you're not necessarily being careful with, you know, naming the tracks before, that could really kind of speed up the process for you. Okay, so we see question, Greg, is it possible to manually correct the tempo track points after tempo detection without altering the other ones? When I tried to delete an extra point, all the other points change their position. Okay, so let's go ahead and do just a quick tempo detection here. Here, I'll just do it on our project. Okay, so we'll come here and just do a quick tempo detection of this. All right, so is it possible to manually correct the tempo track points after tempo track without altering the other ones? When I try to delete an extra point, all the other points change in their position. So I think once once you've done the tempo detection, it places you into tempo warp mode. So without tempo warp mode at this point, so at this point we could make changes, and as we do this, it will, and we have this activated, this will automatically, make adjustments after that fact. But let's say if I come here and if I delete a tempo event, that, all the other tempo informations kind of stayed the same, but realize that, that may affect some of the information before or after if the event is in musical mode. But as you saw, as I deleted a particular event, I could come here. So I'm going to just delete that event here. And the other events all kind of stayed in position. So let me know if that is working differently for you. All right, so we just have a question. Is there any way to have one MIDI track control and input and play MIDI to multiple instrument tracks? Over time, I created a custom piano with 2 contact instruments. All right, so if we wanted to do something like this, if we start with, I'm going to start with like an instrument rack. Okay, so you could start this from a MIDI track, but not an instrument track. I don't know why, but I'll just come here and let's just say I go to my VSTI. I'm going to add an instrument rack. Okay, so now we can create a MIDI track. And from this MIDI track, if we had other instruments that were open, so let's say, okay, I have a pad shop library. I had Retrolog. Okay, so now from this one instrument, let's say, okay, now I just want this to be a quick piano. All right. So now if we start from a MIDI track, we could just come over here to MIDI sends. I could activate this and say, now I wanted this to go to pad shop and I wanted this to go to Retrolog. So at this point, I'll just load up a quick patch in each of these. So All right, let's come over here to Retrolog and load up a quick preset. So now I could play one particular instrument track. All right, so now if I come over here and just play this, and those can be hidden, but you could also just, you know, very easily take these three, and kind of a different approach is just to say, okay, I want to create these, move selected tracks to new folder, and close the folder and say, you know, this is my piano layer. And then as soon as you just, you know, have that track record enabled, you could, you know, just come right over there and layer different instruments. So you could use MIDI sends. Most people are using instrument tracks. So, you know, consider just coming over and, you know, at this point, just saying, okay, now I could just put all these into. And just layering, and you could just make a layer just like that very easily, and avoid just activating one track. All right, so we see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Thanks for joining the live stream today. Okay, so I think this might have been with the volume automation. So let's say, you know, if you wanted to do, so it says, I meant a reference track. It says reference track. I assume it's reference. Can you show that with a reference track from CD or Spotify? So let's say I'm here, and let me just go to, see if I have this project. Okay, just open this project here. So let's say, you know, if I wanted to check the reference levels of different tracks. Again, it's kind of the, so if you wanted to do like reference, so, you know, if you wanted to just have a reference of other tracks, we could do this. Kind of utilizing control room functionality. So let's say in this project, I have a nice, and let's say I wanted to take a particular track, let's say this track as a reference, and this is just kind of a mixed down file. So I'm going to select this track. And what I'm going to do is on this track that I've imported from a CD or a WAV file or gotten from, you know, whatever source, I'm going to choose my output bus to no bus and go over here to QSends, and I'm going to say, let's go to QSend 1. So right now this track is not going out. So if I solo this track, it's not being sent anywhere. So there's no destination. But if I wanted to hear this track, let's say as my reference, let's say I put a nasty EQ on it. All I have to do is in the control room, I can say, let's go to my Q Mix 1. And then now I'm only hearing this track. So this is my reference track. And then I could say, let's go to my mix. So now I can say I want to listen to the reference track. So, okay, now I want to listen to my mix versus that in real time. So that's that's a way of doing reference tracks. So, you know, if you wanted to actually, you know, compare sonically, compare levels, you could do that. Just make sure that you're not adding gain on the Q mix. Set this to like 0 dB. Set, you know, your track, your Q mix to 0 dB, and then you could just click on your reference track, which is sent to your Q mix. So you can do that in your main section and listen to your mix. So basically this track isn't going through the master effects processing. It's just going straight out to the through the control room for reference monitoring. Okay, so we're just saying, just a question. So are you saying that Cubase tutorials of Steinberg should work the exact way for Nuendo? So yeah, just about every single time it'll work that way. You could safely assume that. Okay, so I see Jazz Dude just mentioned he didn't see a question from Benny, but if you, I see you asking about it again, Benny, but if you just want to ask the question, we could send that. Okay, so I just see, so just a question, says, I have a question. Is there a CC velocity window? So, you know, when we look at, you know, there's MIDI continuous controllers, which are often kind of broken down into, you know, into different components, you know, but if we want to look at a MIDI part here, we could just look at velocity, which will show up by default directly in your Cubase. So we see these lines. So, you know, the velocity is part of the MIDI note message. And then we could add CC, such as, okay, I want modulation. So when I come, you know, I could draw in modulation data like this, and that is continuous controllers, and it's not necessarily tied to a particular note message, but all you have to do is double click in and open the key editor, and then in the bottom you could just click here, and there's even just a preset to, you know, if you wanted to come here to show velocity only. So velocity and CC, they're independent things and are different, but you could see both at the bottom in the MIDI key editor or the list editor. All right, you see Michael Teams is dispensing of ice cream. All right, so we had from the tempo detection, so it's from Sven's earlier question, why doesn't the MIDI track follow the tempo values on the tempo track after tempo detection? All right, so let's just jump back here. We'll go back to this project. So maybe we'll see if adding the tempo, if we had the data before adding it on. Okay, so I'll come over here and I'll just all right, put something critically that will not fit at all. All right, so let's say if we play this. just go back to my control room. So we had the mix. All right, so now we're going to do our tempo detection. All right, and I'm just going to snap this. All right, so I'll just mute this. All right, so now let's see. So after we've done this, I now want to put let's say if I go to my media bay and if I drag a new MIDI, if I drag the MIDI event in again, so now that I dragged a new MIDI event in, so it looks like the new events will automatically conform to the tempo, but the existing ones may not. So I could play around with it and see if I can figure out if there's any logic behind that. But I noticed that once we did the tempo detection here, that this did switch to linear time base. So maybe that has something to do with it. So, but if you want to email me, Sven, I'd be happy to kind of play around with it to see why new MIDI follows a tempo and existing one doesn't after tempo detection. All right, so I see just Benny just so I see your comments. So do you see me now? So I see you asking if your question has been asked, but I just haven't seen your question. So maybe if you just retype your question again. All right, so Spike Williams checking in from Cardiff in Wales, or Cardiff. Sorry if I don't know how to pronounce it. All right, and we have Christopher Nielsen from Fall River, Massachusetts. All right, so we see, hi Greg, when Cubase 12 is released, will it have a discount for upgrading from 11.5, or discounts are only on Black Friday? Thank you. So currently there is, the latest version is 11, so there isn't an 11.5, and generally like when the new releases come out, there generally isn't an you can always upgrade or update at a discount, so you never have to pay full price. So there's always, so it's not like you have to buy the program again. So in years past, it's been in the US like $99 generally to go from like a 10 to an 11, or or kind of like a next generation. So but and there may be discounts for Cubase or for updates later, but I don't think we'll see it initially on release date. So okay, my chat field jumped. right, so I think I'm back in the neighborhood where I was. All right, so I just see way to assign, create automation lanes so horrible on Cubase. So let's say if I'm here in particular plugins, I could, come right over here. So let's say I open up just a squasher plugin, or let's say just something. I'll just randomly pick. All right, so if I want this particular band, I could just right click and show the lane directly there. So I think it's part of the VST3 specification. So you could just right click and see that. So many times, many plugins may not support that fully, but really all you have to do, I don't think it's horrible, is just kind of come here and say, okay, I just want to, right click on this particular parameter and show the automation tracks. So okay, so I have a question. Hi, Greg. Is it possible to re-trigger the play button in Media Bay so it will interrupt the one-shot sample and play from the beginning? All right, so let's say if I'm playing along. All right, and I want to audition like kick samples, one-shot samples. All right, so if we just wanted to replay. See if there's a way to kind of. All right, so let's see if I just come here. So we're playing along. So right now I just have it to I have it set to play new release. So if I have my one-shot samples, I have this set these two activated here. Then it will continue to kind of re-trigger. So it looks like, if you have the play mode turned on and these two, that you could have it, the one-shot sample repeat. All right. So we see a question for Cubase. Is there a way to replace cymbal sounds like drumagog or some other way to replace crash and ride cymbals with drum sounds? So let's say if we're here, I'll jump back to. just revert this. You know, so you can kind of do the same principle for. So let's say I have hi-hats here. Okay, so I'll just come to my hi-hat. And we'll come here to, so I'll just kind of zoom in. All right, so we say I just wanted to kind of stop the bleed. And at this point I say, let's, I'm gonna select this particular drum set. And I think we have F#1 would be my guess for hi-hats. Then now I could just come right over here and we're gonna put it on the first selected track. That now we could so this way you could just take cymbal crashes. So once you go into like, you know, where you would see a cymbal crash, you could just, you know, put a hit point directly there and then click on create MIDI notes. So, you know, it's going to be hard to catch, like, you know, the different dynamic nuances on a ride cymbal, like getting closer to the bell. So, you know, but you can kind of achieve the velocity. But if there's a lot of compression on a recording, then that could be tricky. All right. Just reading through different comments. All right. So just question, do you know if Cubase 12 will support for OS X Mojave? I have an update to 12, but fear I won't be able to use on my Mac Pro running Mojave. So we'll have to kind of wait until the release date. I can't really share any of the information. But right after release date, we should have the all the system requirements for that. Okay, so we just see, could you go over using live input with a chord track, for example, add interest to a piano track containing block chords dragged in from the chord track, create a bass line from the chord track. All right, so let's say if I wanted to, you know, figure out what the chord track, and Mark Roos does this a lot on different tracks. So let's say if we wanted to come over here and we wanted to kind of thicken up sounds. So I will come over here. So let's say, okay. So I'm going to just derive the chords from the piano part. So I'll select that. Let's come over here. And what I want to do is I'm just going to add maybe like a instrument sound with like a choir. It's like a vocal patch. All right, let me see if I... Okay, I'll just do a quick vocal thing. . 'Kay, 'I'll just do a quick vocal thing. 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 'Kay, All right, so now I have let's try a different patch here real quick. Or I'll just do a quick, maybe like a string sound from retro log. We'll see if that's working. But often what you could do, I'm not sure why it's not getting sounds. Let me just check. But, you know, often what you can do is just kind of, you know, put the chord track in monitor. Let's try loading the project again. Sorry about that. Let's see if we can do this. All right. Well, so generally all you'd have to do, I'm not sure why it's not cooperating today. I'll try it with maybe one other project here quickly. Okay, so let's see if okay, so let's say I just wanted to come here and we have a chord track. So I'm just going to tell it to play back the monitored tracks. So as we play this, the chord track will now play back this Halion.
Into the night, I turn it up, you wouldn't mind. Up until now, that was okay.
And I'll make this louder. So
Guess all along I was so naive. Now you're packing
I just put the
boxes,
track in,
barely.
and now we could thicken it up with.
Our musical.
And let's say if I wanted to layer that sound.
What's mine and what's yours? 'Cause now you're asking Beatles or Stones. Something about that
So I'll just come over here and drop in a violin patch. And then I'll come over here to MIDI and we'll put this on the same MIDI channel.
That was okay. That was okay. Suddenly it's Beatles or Stones. Something about that just sounds so wrong. What I said is
So now just all being triggered from the chord pad. So I just have the chord track and just kind of adding that in. So let's listen to.
that was okay. Guess all along I was so naive.
So without any effort, you could just have kind of different chords layered. And let's say I want the first part to be transposed up an octave.
I've got to choose what's mine and what's yours. 'Cause now you're at something about that just sounds so wrong. What is
And that's how you could use kind of the chord track to kind of fill stuff in, make it sound more produced, more layered without spending a lot of effort. Don't know why my instruments were misbehaving. Sorry about that. See, Dan just says, trying to make Cubase 12 appear on their computer by saying it 3 times. So probably won't work, but appreciate the effort. All right, so we just see how much RMS level and LUFS level should be on the final mix level. So it could really depend on, what you're actually delivering for. So, most people doing, for streaming, I think Spotify and other music streaming services, and this kind of changes over time, like to be at minus 14 LUFS. If you wanted to do like broadcast and post-production, it's usually minus 23 LUFS. So. Okay, so we just see why since 20 years there's no improvements concerning adding, creating automation lanes with third-party plugins in Cubase. So there are, but we can't necessarily write the code for third-party plugins. So, one quick way of doing it, if you want it to, as soon as you wanted to open up an automation lane, is if you just do reveal parameter on write. So, we can't go through and change every third-party plugin. If they don't follow the specifications that are defined, we can't make them necessarily do that. So now if I just come to a particular plugin, as soon as you go to automate a particular parameter, so let's say, and I believe this works easily with just any plugin. As soon as I go to automate the plugin parameter, and then it will just show right up. So if you're going to be automating a parameter, if you want that to show up, you're probably going to automate it. So just go to your automation panel and just, activate reveal parameter on write. So if you're going to automate the plugin, just automate the parameter. And with that function turned on, it's automatically shown. So, and that's been added in the last 20 years. And it says you need to search each parameter instead to quick assign it like in Studio One. So no, you don't have to search for each parameter. So. All right, so we see, hi Greg, how can I use the range selection tool to batch delete instances of a track instead of one by one? So if you want it to just, let's say if we come here and we have the range selection tool and you wanted to delete a number of tracks, just grab the range and then just hit the delete key. So if that's what you want to do, or if you wanted to just, select just the range on a particular, like these 3 tracks, you know, just select a range and then delete. All right, just all right, reading through different comments. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, so we see also see a question. So what is your advice? This is directed to Michael Pierce. What is your advice to assign quick automation parameters? So if you want to do quick links, like, you know, for quick controls. So let's say if I'm here and I just wanted to automate something, all you have to do is click on the learn button and then capture the parameter. If I come to the plugin here, I go to slot 2 and I capture the parameter. I come to slot 3. I want this to be panning. So you could just come here, click on the learn, and then, you know, whatever parameter you want, you could just adjust. And now you could have those controlled from quick controls, just like that. So. See, Richard James just wanted to say that it's lovely soaking in a bath watching this, but frustrating because the phone screen is too small to see any detail. Just get an iPad or like a Surface Go or something like that, or watch it on a TV, and then you can see more. All right, so as you see from Sven Isaacson, I've done some testing originally. The audio track file is 131 bars and the MIDI is 115 bars. After tempo detection, the audio is 122 bars and the MIDI is 107 bars. That can't be right. Changing the tempo shouldn't affect the bar count for the MIDI part, should it? So it can, depending on, you know, if musical or linear mode. But if you have a short project that you want to share with me, Sven, and you could email like a link if you've uploaded it somewhere to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so just see, I have created 5 global workspaces. For example, so if I select the 5th one, Cubase will open the other 2 mixers I have created. I have to close them. Do you know what I'm doing wrong? I'm using 11.5. Okay, so you have 5 global workspaces. If you open the 5th one, Cubase will open the other 2 mixers I have created. I have to close them. So let's see if I could recreate this. So I think I have different workspaces set up here. So let's say, okay, I wanted to go to all right, so I will All right, so let's say I wanted to come here. Oops, hit the wrong one. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's say if I jump back here, my mixer, and we go to 2, should be kind of set to Variaudio, and let's go to our score editor in workspace 3. So it all kind of seems to work as expected here. So I'm not sure if all right, just reading on. Okay, so I just see I have a USB turntable and can't seem to get it to input into an audio track, and any settings I need to change. So you need to, I'm not sure, you probably don't have a dedicated ASIO driver for that, so probably go to your studio setup. So I'm not sure if you're running on Mac or PC, but you would need to come over here. If it has an audio driver, you could select it here. On Windows platform, you may see like a generic low latency, which would work with anything that's going to be like a class compliant driver. So if you switch it there, you could see the control panel. So let's say if I go to like built-in audio here, you might see when you come here a control panel that you could set the input and output for the USB turntable. But if it's not being recognized, make sure it's being seen by the computer. If it's not being seen by the computer, you could do that. But try the generic low latency, or you could download an ASIO for all as a utility driver to work with it. So, but probably do that. And then once you have that set up, you can go to your audio inputs, audio connections to the inputs tab, and you should see all of your available inputs listed for you there. And you could just set it from your USB turntable. Okay, so I see a question. When using free warp in the sample editor, I don't seem to be able to get the background grid to display as triplets, making it sometimes tricky to line things up. Is there a way? So currently when we do warping in the sample editor, it doesn't work with triplet grids. So when we come over here and we want to do free warp, we'll see this, like the background grid won't be set to triplets. So it's a feature request that's been sent in a lot. So I know that the team is aware of it. So, but if you don't see the triplets, it's because it's not there. So. Okay, so I see a question from Sean Rollins. Says, Greg, how do we color multiple track headers at once? Coloring multiple events is really easy, but it seems track headers need to be done one by one. All right, so if I just want to, so the trick, one of the tricks is to make sure that you don't have an event selected. So I'm going to select a number of tracks. I'll come here to the color palette. So I'm going to just go to the color tool here. So I could just now come right over here and select the different colors. So once these tracks are selected, whatever color I select will automatically just show up right there. So make sure an event's not selected, select the tracks, and then, you could just, whatever selected, you can just recolor like so. Okay, so I just see, hello, Greg. Is there a way to fix phase locking in Cubase like auto align plugin? I'll appreciate the help. So, all you have to do if you wanted to, do auto aligning is, really just to use there is an alignment tool that's built into Cubase. So if you wanted to, come directly here. So if you want to take a number of tracks, I could say, if we come to the alignment panel, we could access it from this icon here, or from, I think, from the audio menu. I think we could just open up the alignment. Yeah, open the audio alignment panel. So, if you wanted to just flip the phase, you could select an event and flip the phase right here. But you could also, if you wanted to do kind of alignment, we could say I want that as a reference track and I wanted to add those as targets, and just hit align audio, and you could align the audio just like that. So that's built in since I think 10. So let me know if that answers your question. Okay, certainly. Okay, so I see a question, how to rewire other DAW and get sound in Cubase. So, make sure that, Rewire is something that's probably going away as a technology. Propeller heads have stopped developing it, so it's not working on contemporary operating systems and processors. But if you have Rewire, you could just come right over here to your Rewire setup, and then if you have a Rewire, a Rewire program that can follow to a Rewire host, you'll see it show up there, and then the audio could be routed directly inside of Cubase. So. Okay, just reading through some other comments. Thanks for all the great questions. And if you've learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button. Okay, so we just see question, how to record vocal without any effect. So the only time when we do a recording, so let's do a new project here. So when we do recording, you have input channels and the actual audio channel. So your inputs are defined directly from, let me just switch one of my outputs here. Okay, so now when we have inputs, so we have input channels, and this is where we could add or take gain away from a particular, from the input source, and this is the audio channel that the audio is recorded. If we have effects on our audio channel here, so let's say I have an effects channel track. All right, so just make it a reverb. Let's go ahead and close that window. So now I have this going to, let's say, my reverb. All right, and we have it activated. So now when I record the audio, we monitor through the reverb, but the audio is recorded dry. If we put on the input channel, if we put an insert of reverb or guitar amp or other plugin, if the insert is in the particular input channel, that's going to be embedded and recorded to the signal. So most people don't put effects on the input channel, but you just use that to set gain and come over here to audio 1, and then just as you record, you can just come over here and monitor through the reverb there. So that's how you can record without reverb. Some audio interfaces will have built-in reverb that you can monitor, like the Steinberg UR series. Some mixers will just put reverb on everything, and you may have to turn that off. And while we're here kind of on this topic, one of the questions that was mailed in was why can't I hear the reverb when I'm trying to record? So generally, if you want to hear the reverb while tracking and you're not hearing it, it's probably because the audio interface is set to direct monitoring. And what direct monitoring does on the vast majority of interfaces, it takes the input signal directly from the input to the output so that we could monitor with minimal latency. So if we want to come over here, let's say I have EQ and reverb. At this point, we wouldn't hear any of this because when we go to direct monitoring, it's taking the signal like almost a direct patch from the input to the output of the audio interface. So if we have effects on a channel and you can't hear it and you can't figure out why, come over to your studio menu to studio setup and make sure that when you select the audio interface under audio system, that direct monitoring isn't activated. So, because the Steinberg UR series interfaces have built-in DSP, we can enable direct monitoring and also access the built-in DSP. And that's a unique thing with the UR series. Okay. Okay, so it says, just see question. I recorded last time and sent it for mixing, but he said my vocal, there was an effect. So how can I pure voice as a wave, record and export it? Thank you. So, if you have a vocal file that's in here and you have effects on it, so many times what you want to do, so let's say if I have just a quick... I have an audio file here, and this has effects. So, many times if you're sending it off to someone else, I'll get your body moving for you. All right, so say if I come here and I just wanted to now have this with effects on it. So I'll go, let's say, to my sends, and we'll make sure that, so now we do this. I'll get your body moving for you. So when you do an export audio mix down, so depending on how you delivered the files, You know, like there's built-in functions in the export audio mixdown where you could say when we select multiple that you would just choose to have all the effects disabled on the tracks, and that would give you the pure sound without effects. So, but it really depends how you kind of exported it. So, but you know, if you exported it with the effects, you could export it without the effects as well. Okay, so we say, just see, is it possible for the MIDI from one instrument to control another instrument? So if we want to just come here to, you know, if we start from a MIDI track, so I will just go to my VST and I can do this by adding a rack. So let's say, let's see if Retrolog will wake up. All right, so let's say now I'm here and I wanted to have like a string patch. And I have another instance. I could just come over here, another instrument. So let's say, okay, now I want to add a Halion 6. Say I want to layer that with an organ. So now on our MIDI track, we could just go to our MIDI sends, and I could just say, let's come here, let's activate the send, and now I want it to play back Halion. So I could now just have both of them layered together. So just the strings. And now layered. Or again, you could just take two instruments very easily and put them in a folder and arm the folder for record, and you could do it just like that. All right, so we just see, hi Greg, is it possible? Okay, so hi Greg, film scoring. What's the most efficient way to change the tempo of a segment during a cue without affecting the rest of the project before or after the tempo change? So I know what a lot of people will do. Let's say, you know, if we have, just go to this one project, might help with that. Okay, so let's say we come here. All right, so let's say I'll just come here. So let's say we have our tempo track. So, you know, if we have tempo changes, you know, we could put, you know, so I could check with some of my film composer friends, but I think what they end up doing, you know, because as we make tempo changes here, so let's say if we have kind of a ramp up in tempo, that if we change this, that could affect the timing of the tempos. So let's say if we're here. So now if I change this tempo, you know, I think what some will do is like, you know, if you have events that are, you know, set and you don't want those to change, is just to lock the position of those. So whatever tempo change you may have after, like, you know, particular events could be locked in time. So, you know, give that a shot and see if that works for you. Okay, so we have a question from Michael Pierce. Is it possible to turn on all right buttons on all plugins on a certain track in one go, like with the master fader? I think it might be part of the automation question, because that does look like what it might be a cool feature. So, all right, so let's take a look. Okay, and I'll just add some plugins on this. Okay, so I'll just put on a modulation effect here, so let's say. Okay, so is it possible to turn on the right buttons on all plugins on a certain track? So let's say if I have the plugins open, so let's say I'm playing along, and if I have the track in record, so the track is in record, and when I open up a plugin, it is kind of automatically, the plugins are automatically in record. So, so let me know if that doesn't work for you. So it says like with the master fader, I think, so I think that once the track is in record, that the plugins on that track are also in write and read. So let me know if that's what you mean, Michael Pierce. All right, so we have Flavio checking in from Brazil. Thanks for joining us, being part of the community today. All right, so we have FJ Segovia from Madrid, I believe, if memory serves me correct. All right, so you see how to you change to a different plugin once you've created a track with a different plugin. So let's say if I come like to this bass part and we're playing, you know, we could. So, you know, we have the plugin on, you could just kind of load in different plugins. So, and if you, I'm not sure if this is for like MIDI. So let's say if I have, you know, an instrument track that's loaded up. So say if I come here, so I'm not sure if it's a MIDI. Okay, and if we wanted to do to another plugin, so I mean, you could always, let's say if I add another instrument track, and I wanted this to be, you know, so if you wanted to just, you know, even copy, paste, you know, the events, or paste at origin, you know, on this selected track. So you could just, you know, move it down. So if you wanted to, you know, have that sound play now in Mystic as opposed to Halion 6, just move it to a different track. So instead of necessarily swapping out the plugin, so let's see if we go to our plugin rack here. So now if I have this track playing out of Halion 6, I'm not sure if we switch the plugin here, if that will carry over. So yeah, you could also do that. So just switch from the rack. So now, so if you just kind of click here, so everything that was routed out to Halion will now be routed out to Retrolog. So let me know if it's for MIDI, for an instrument, or an effects channel track. But it looks like you could do it pretty easily. All right, so see, JVI likes the Be Someone demo project. So it's also from Vince Melmed, who wrote Beatles and Stones. All right, so we have from Dan a couple of feature requests. One, the ability to change the size of channel settings window like every other window. So I guess that's going to be like this window. So, so yeah, you know, some of these things will be fixed to make sure that it could be seen on other computer monitors, but I'll pass that along. Two, the ability to hide faders in the mixer window. So yeah, most people want to see the faders in the mix console window, but let's see if we can, if we come here to full screen mixer. Yeah, so we kind of have, I think you know, most people want to see the faders, but you could probably also just kind of minimize the size of the faders a bit as well, but I'll pass that along as feature requests. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. Okay, so Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. Okay, so we just see, I have a question about the Halion Sonic pads. Is there a way to trigger it on the keyboard or have it record on mouse click? I'm not sure how to trigger the chord pads in Halion. All right, so let's go ahead and jump back to Halion. All right. Let me see if I can find a preset that has some. Okay. Okay, so really all you have to do is, let's say if we are, let me adjust my. Okay, so if you just right click on the pads, you could assign a trigger note. So at this point, I have this set to C1, D1. So if I So, try just to right click and then you could assign the trigger notes directly there. And then as you play the C1, it would then trigger the chord pad and play back in Halion on the track. So, see, it's also, you mentioned Halion Sonic, so let me make sure it's not different in Halion Sonic. I think it'll be the same. So now if I just wanted to come over here, I will solo this track and I'll just hit that one particular note. And now, so now when I play, and I hit that one note that triggers the chord pad. So now when I play back, so that's just some gibberish I played, but when I hit the C1, that triggers the chord for you. So just on from within the instrument itself, you can right click to assign it and then right click and you do a snapshot chord. So you can say, okay, I just want to come here and then hit stop, and then you could just kind of do all sorts of fun stuff with that. Then when you hit that note and record that MIDI note, it will trigger the chord for the instrument sound. All right, so I see question, what's the best way to make a sample or instrument stop playing when another one begins other than automation? For example, within Groove Agent or two different instrument VSTs. So, if you're doing it inside a Groove Agent, there are some different functions in Groove Agent for where you could have exclusive groups so that you can't have like two notes playing at once, and I always forget where this is at. But let's say but you can't have it so that as soon as one sample is playing that the other one isn't, that it will cut off. So like for hi-hats that it will be triggering, but most people will generally tend to use automation for that. But there is let's just see if I could find a group. I usually forget where this is at, sorry. But there is kind of like exclusive group modes in Groove Agent for that. So if you email me, I could show it on Friday's live stream. All right, so we see from that we have 101 likes at 2:45 p.m. So that's great. Thanks to everyone. All right. So just see a question: what is the fate of music if USA and Russia start a war? I think music will be the same, but but I won't. We'll hopefully that won't happen, but we'll see. All right. So we see question. Hey, Greg, can you tell me the purpose of why there is 3 mixer windows? So many people, when using large projects, will want to have different mixer windows to show different elements. So you may come over here to Mix Console 1, and maybe I only want to see inputs and outputs on this particular mixer. I'm tracking 64 channels. On Mix Console 2, so when I come over here, let's say, okay, so I'm only seeing that, but Mix Console 2, I want to see I don't want to see input channels. I want to see audio, instrument, sampler, MIDI. And Mix Console 3, I will only want to see, let me just activate. I only want to see, I only want to see group and effects channels, so we could have different types of tracks on different mix consoles. In fact, a lot of people, Nuendo has 4 separate mix consoles. So instead of scrolling to different tracks, you could have different tracks selected and viewable. So I only want to see drums in this. I only want to see vocals in this mixer. So that way you could kind of custom tailor which particular mixer components you want to see in different mixer channels. Okay, so I just see from Ed Pacheco, I've been creating all my music in recent. What is the difference between production and recent? Been doing it in recent for 5 years. I'm not sure if it's reason or recent. Maybe if you could specify. I'm not sure if it's like a translation or something, but if you could specify, that would be helpful. I'd be happy to answer. Okay, so we see Dan just wishes for Cubase automation to be on top of the audio and MIDI region area, like in other programs, instead of a drop down underneath the parts. So, sometimes, when you want to actually work with particular, multiple automation events on top of each other, which happens in complex mixes, then to be able to see the interaction between two different things it can be really important. So that could be harder when it's all on top of the same event. But I know I passed that feature request on before, and we'll do it again. Okay, so we see CC 121 feature list, just a motor fader on and off assignable to function buttons or the foot switch, or better, a key command option. Thanks. So I'm not sure if that will be changed or it could be addressed through how the CC 121 is designed, but since it was recently discontinued, I don't think we'll see that, but I'll pass it on. Sometimes our Yamaha colleagues will update stuff after stuff has been discontinued. So All right, so we see from Michael Teams. Sorry, my chat field just jumped. Okay, so the question is, sometimes the Variaudio doesn't open. Just get the editor screen. Must be doing something wrong without about combined events. Please walk through Variaudio for me. So if you want to see Variaudio, so let's say if I want to look at Variaudio for a particular event here, I could double click, and usually I just go to Variaudio and click on Edit Variaudio, and it will do its analysis right here. Now let's say if we find something that might have multiple clips, multiple recordings within. All right, so if we come here, let's say we go to our vocals, and I wanted to, do Variaudio editing on this. So, it's going to be like a file, like, basically almost like, make sure that when you do it, that you select each individual file. So because it will have to do its analysis. So if I go over here and we look at Variaudio, we can see the Variaudio handling. If the file is, so like this file has been repeated multiple times. So if I do Variaudio editing here, that will take effect if it's referencing the same audio files. Sometimes what I tell people to do, if you're, once you have kind of like the vocal take that you like, is to just select all these. I would make a new track version, and I would often just come here and say, okay, on my track version, I want to now duplicate events. So I duplicated the track version. And then what I'm going to do, sometimes because Variaudio is dealing with the files, if you now create a separate file, that way you don't have to constantly close and open multiple Variaudio windows. You could just kind of keep everything within one window, which is often better. But if you needed to do editing, you can now just come right here and then have the individual files or duplicate to the edit. And at that point, when you double click, everything could be kind of dealt with on a single file basis, and you still have all of your original files intact. See, just seeing a comment, the learn function is something I needed but didn't know I needed. Thanks. That's great. Okay, so when will Reason Rack for Cubase be updated? Will an upgrade be free? So you have to contact Kevin. You have to contact Propeller Heads and see. I wouldn't expect them to answer like Cubase update questions, but I don't know where they are in their product cycle. Okay, you see, hi Greg, amazing stuff. Question, how to automate the accordion sound in Halion Sonic to get a bit closer to a real accordion instrument, to have a little bit more of a bellow being stretched feeling. Okay, so let's go ahead and haven't worked with the accordion sound in a long time. I do have a friend, it's probably one of the most highly regarded accordion players in the world, Joey Miskulin. So nicest guy, and just such an amazing talent, and probably one of the best musicians I've ever met. Check him out. He plays in Riders in the Skies, but we'll see. We'll see if it's in Halion Sonic SE. All right, so let's see if there's a particular preset that was mentioned. All right, so I'm not sure. Let's see if there's different parameters here. So, so there are several different accordion instruments. I'm not, so maybe. And as you adjust like the mod wheel. So I'm just playing chords, and we have different flex phrases. So we can trigger different flex phasers. So if there's like a particular accordion sound that you're looking for, or there's one that you've been working with, let me know. But and I could check. I could check in with Joey. I haven't given him a call in a while, so it'd be great to catch up. If you have any particular accordion things, you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay. So a question: what is your opinion on a Halion Sonic SE library of sounds? Could they be improved by artists by using the parameters given? So a lot of times, there's a lot of sounds that sometimes people tend not to utilize the sounds as much. A lot of the sounds are kind of done in conjunction with Yamaha. So many popular Yamaha keyboards that cost thousands of dollars, will utilize kind of the same sounds. But having a very robust engine. So there's lots of great sounds that, you could explore that people, I think, could get benefits just by kind of using them as opposed to going elsewhere for default when starting with sounds. So HTC from Kevin, which version of Spectral Layers comes with Wavelab Pro? I recently bought Wavelab Pro, so I don't, if there was one, it would be Spectral Layers 1, but I'm not sure if it comes bundled with Wavelab Pro or if it's only comes bundled with Cubase. Okay, so you see, all right, so we have a question. I think we covered this earlier, but just in case missed it and someone missed it, does Cubase Elements have Variaudio? How can I get it? Thanks. So Cubase Elements does not have Variaudio. Variaudio comes in Cubase Artist as well as Cubase Pro. All right, so we see a nice comment from Rick Valentine. He's a wonderful composer. Check out his work. Thank you so much for your help, Greg. I so appreciate the ongoing help. You're very welcome. Hope you're doing well. Okay, we just see what's the right level of a mix before sending to a mastering engineer. So a lot of mastering engineers would like to have their project sent to them at -12 or -6 dB. But if you totally compress, if you have to do like a real amount of heavy duty compression to get to -6 or -12, you're better off not doing that and letting the mastering engineer use their particular tools. And the best thing is, if you know who your mastering engineer is, and maybe if Michael Romanowski's in, he could chime in because he's a wonderful mastering engineer. I think he's only nominated for 3 Grammys this year or something. But contact your mastering engineer and have a conversation with them before and see what you could do to make it easier for them to make your project better. So just a quick phone call, and because one analogy I heard that still kind of resonates with me is, it's hard to unburn the steak once it's been burnt. So if you are conscious about it, try to aim for -6, -12, and realize that if you give the mastering engineer the ability to use their arsenal of tools, that it could probably help. But just reach out to your particular mastering engineer as well. Okay, so we see, is there a setting that will allow me to drag audio from the Cubase project to other programs or to the desktop? I could do this in my other DAWs, so I'm pretty sure it's just a setting I haven't found. So I don't think so that we could do it from the desktop. So most of the time people want to drag from the desktop in, but once we come over here, it's easy enough to save to the desktop. But let's say if I have, let me just, so, because we want to kind of maintain stuff at the project level kind of as much as possible. Because once you kind of drag out to the desktop, then you could change the file. Let's see how many projects I have open. If I can find a desktop here, a spot. So why, some of the reasoning could be that it doesn't really, because if we have this audio file in the project, now if I take it and drag it to, well, we just dragged it to the desktop. So it looks like it will just, let's give it a shot here. Let me activate a project and see if we could do this. So, because obviously Cubase is going to want you to, have this file. So it may not want you to do this because at that point you could drag it from, out of the project. So let's just, yeah. So, because a lot of times if we change changing the file folder, the file structure is not good. So you could just, export the selected, you could do an export audio mixdown directly to the desktop. Because we used to have it, I think, and then people would move it there, and then the program couldn't find their files afterwards, and it was like, oh, why am I missing files? I dragged it to the desktop, and then it's like, okay, and then they erased it, and it got messy for file management. So just export to the desktop. All right, so we see Graham Witcher's on the live stream, and got to celebrating his son's birthday today. And we learned that takeaway pizza was the easiest option. So wish a happy birthday to your son, and thanks for joining us. So question, once you have Cubase Pro and get Wavelab Pro, can you use the Spectral Layers same version? Now Spectral Layers 8, I can use this in Cubase. So if you have Spectral Layers, so Spectral Layers 1 comes with Cubase Pro. I don't think it comes with Wavelab Pro. I could be mistaken. But, and then you could get the Spectral Layers, there's an Elements and the Spectral Layers Pro. So you could, if you update, or, if you purchase those licenses, you could have access to it. All right. So we have a question for Kevin. Can you give me more functionality of Spectral Layers 8? I haven't used it much. Please help give me feedback on the functionality and how to use Spectral Layers 8. So if you could tell us if you're using, Pro, Spectral Layers 1, or Artist, that would be helpful, Kevin. But if you wanted to go to Spectral Layers, to access it from inside of Cubase, it could obviously run as a standalone program. You'd go to your audio and then to extensions. And then from extensions, you'll see Spectral Layers. So we could just now come here. That would launch it via an ARA2 extension. So now when we double click, we can have access to doing your spectral editing. So this allows us to come over here, and we could, think of this as almost like the waveform, and we're kind of looking at the side of the waveform. So it's kind of like turning our two-dimensional waveform into a three-dimensional view. So we could see that we're going to have kind of our low frequencies, our high frequencies, harmonic content, so that we could select and do various editing of particular frequencies. So that would allow us to kind of do a lot of AI processing for, matching EQs or matching ambiances or reverb reduction. So, and again, that depends on which version that you are using with that. So. All right, so we have Tron from Norway. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, so we see, so I have a setup track using a Steinberg plugin, but I decided I want to use an NI plugin instead. I tried, but have difficulty making the change. So I think we covered this before. So if you want to switch this, like this track that's going out to a particular plugin to another, you just go to the VST instrument rack, and we could say, okay, I wanted to take this, particular instrument here, and if I want it, you could just click in the instrument name and load up a different instrument to play it from. And then the routings will automatically change and carry over. So give that a shot. Okay, we have a question. How to adjust the size of an enlarged selected track. Okay. Okay, so when we come here, this is a little editing option that you have enlarge selected track. And now if I select different tracks, I'm just going to use my arrow keys down, that we will have that selected track be larger so we can see more parameters. So if I wanted to adjust the size, let's say if I want to make this bigger, so I'm just going to make that selected track bigger. And now as I move up and down, we could see that the selected track is bigger. So once you have it expanded, we could come here, and as I go to different tracks, that would then be the size. So once you have it expanded, resize the track. So you could just kind of come here, drag down the bottom to make it smaller, larger, whatever you want it to be. And then as you use the enlarge selected track function, that sizing will be maintained. All right, so you just see from Kevin, can we zoom about Spectral Layers? What day will you be free and around what time? So I'm kind of swamped for the next week or two, but you could try maybe reaching out Monday. Monday's a holiday here in the States, so I'll probably be working. But maybe Monday morning I might have a little bit of free time if you want, Kevin. Okay, so I think I may understand this now. Hey, Greg, I really want to know what I've been doing wrong. Is it best to use recent or production in creating tracks? I think this might be with a hub. So let's say we do a new project. So, these are just templates that are set up. So recent will allow you to kind of, generally if I'm starting a new track, I may go to more if I'm using my template. So if we wanted to, have particular templates, we could click on more, and all of your kind of starting off points, productions, these are just kind of like quick starting off points. So as we work with that, we could do that. But recent will allow you to, open up a particular track to start. So, but, consider using the create empty track function as well. So instead of production or recent here, recent is going to allow you to open up your already existing track. So if you're starting a new track, maybe start with empty, or if you've compiled or created a template, start with that. Sorry for missing that earlier. Okay, just reading through different questions. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, so I see a question. If I export with the project setting dry, my automation doesn't work. What is the practical way of exporting without inserts but with the automation? All right, so and this is when we go to export audio mix down, that when we have probably we go to multiple and we have this set to dry, that won't include effects and inserts. So if you wanted to include the automation, come over here and we'll just say enable, like inserts and strip, or if you wanted to do sends, so you can enable that. So as soon as we do that, you could go into like the full screen mix console, and you'll see a little setting here that for what's called states, I think. So state buttons, and that's what you see here. So I'll just activate my state buttons from the toolbar. And as we activate state buttons, I could come over here. We'll have inserts, EQ, channel strip, sends. So if I wanted to bypass these, you can hold down, I think it's Alt or Option, and click, and that will just bypass those particular functions. So at that point, you could, export without any of the processing and include the automation. Okay, so I see a question. What's the best way to use the vocal double plugin? Okay, so let's take a look. So we'll come here to this. All right, just revert this quickly. So I'm not sure if there's a particular vocal double plugin you're talking about. So a lot of people will double with a short. So a lot of people could use.
Let's have a good time. I never promised you.
Like here we have just kind of like a short delay.
But if you're missing me, let it be.
So let's say if I wanted to come to this particular.
Looking good. I'm in the neighborhood.
So here we just have a mono delay. I could also add an effects channel send. And let's say we want to go to cloner.
I'm gonna stick around. But if you're missing me, let it be.
All right, so say I'll just put this quickly on loop.
I'm in the neighborhood.
So if we add like the cloner, this is really good for.
Let's have a good time. I never promised you. I'm gonna stick around.
So if I say, okay, I want it to sound like 4 voices.
But if you're missing me, let it be. I know you're
So as we come over here, you could just say, okay, huge voice.
I'm in the neighborhood. I got some cheap wine. Let's have a good time.
So say we'll just bypass both of those.
I never promised you. I'm gonna stick around.
So
But if you're
huge
missing
voice
me,
is a great
let
doubler.
it be. I know you're looking good. I'm in the neighborhood. I got some cheap wine. Let's have a good time.
So this will add basically like small amounts of pitch shifting.
I'm gonna stick
So coupling that
around.
with like a delay.
But if you're missing me, let it be.
Let's listen to it in
I know you're
context.
looking good. I'm in the neighborhood. I got some cheap wine. Let's have a good time.
Bypass it.
I never promised you. I'm gonna stick around.
So you could use like the cloner plugins, great for doing vocal doubling. All right. So we see John Carroll. So if this is John Carroll, used to live in Leesburg and is now in Massachusetts. If it is, John's an incredibly talented songwriter, performer. In Cubase 11 Pro, when printing individual parts for respective cues from a larger continuous score. Okay, so let's say. Okay, so let's say I'll come over here and just find. All right. All right, so let's say if I break this up into, I'm just going to do. Just turn this off real quick. Okay, so let's say I have a larger score and I only want to print out so printing out individual parts for the respective cues for a longer continuous score. So let's say if I have like a score here and I just wanted to print out the parts. So if we just kind of split the part at this point, we go to our score editor. I'm only going to see. All right, so let's see if we could just see the parts. All right, so I think we want to just like hide those blank measures. So let's see if we. Just see if there's preference here. Just see if I could find this. All right, so say if we come over here to see if I can find this. If not, you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. But I know that there's a way we could do the consolidated rest. Let me just check in preferences as well. All right, let's see if we could do maybe track version. So if I do just a track version, you know, I could still see all of my cues here. And if I go to version 2, now when I come over here, I could just print out that one particular score. There's probably another way of doing it, but if you want to email me, I could probably come up with a solution. So you could email me, John, at clubcubase@steinberg.de. So you could see on the live stream. Okay, so we see from Soren from Sweden. Justin Perkins in Wavelab Pro Hangout says he works in montage mode almost always. He says it's better, non-destructive, but I don't see how I can do normalize to minus 14 LUFS and brick wall to minus 1.0. So let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so let's say we'll load up a quick montage here. All right, so let's say if I wanted to take this, all right, so sometimes, you know, within Wavelab, you know, you may find, like, if I wanted to just come over here, we could take, you know, different files in a montage. And I believe that we're going to have to, you know, and I think, you know, sometimes, you know, people may kind of go with their personal workflow, but if we come, let's say I have this file selected and I say edit source file, that now I'm in the sample editor and I could do processing. And at this point, I could set it to particular levels and then jump, you know, if I make a change here. So let's say, okay, I want my peak level. Let's say it to be, you know, minus, do something obvious, minus 10. That now when I go back to the montage, that we'll see that change. So within the montage, just go, you know, undo that so I don't destroy my friend's master. So once you're in the montage, select the clip, and then when you go to the edit, click on edit source, and then, you know, whatever edits you make in kind of the non-montage editor view will automatically be carried over directly into the montage as well. So give that a try, Soren, if that's what you want to do. If not, just let me know. All right, just reading through questions. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, reading through some more questions. So got some people's questions answered. All right. All right, so we have Nick Olson checking in from Greenland. Thanks for joining us. See Graham Witcher's loving his CC 121. Okay, so I just see, hey, sir, is there an onion skinned feature in Cubase key/MIDI editor? So I'm not sure what an onion skin feature is. Maybe if you could describe it, I'd be happy to kind of tackle the question. I'm not sure what an onion skin feature is, if it's peeling away different things or, but if we have a MIDI event here, you know, and we wanted to, you know, see all of the different events, maybe like if you wanted to expose, you know, you could also look at the same data in the list editor as well from the MIDI menu. So. All right, I'm just going to check the time. All right, so we're doing pretty well. It's gone fast today. All right, so we see from JVI, is there a way to get more Q mixes? Currently I have 3, doesn't seem hardware related. So, you know, there could be a Q mix that's going to be the main mix, plus 4 Q mixes that could be accessed and opened directly from the control room. So if we wanted to come directly to your studio menu to audio connections, we can go to our control room, and here you could add up to 4 Qs. So I have one for VST Connect. If you wanted to have that configured, you have a reference Q, Q Mix 3 or 4, and those are always available inside of your mix console as well. So once we're in the mix console, we can come over, make sure that you go to the racks and that you have within the racks itself that you have QSends enabled and checked there. So, and once you have that done, you can just route directly to Qs. Other people may use direct outputs or use sends for additional Qs. If you need like 12 individual Q mixes, you could do that as well. So. So you see Michael Romanowski step back in. So yeah, so there was a question on, and I just said that Michael may have some more insights on this, on like what's a good level to send for mastering engineer. So maybe Michael could. And Michael just kind of answers. He would like to see peak levels no hotter than -3. Lower is better, especially with higher resolution files. RMS -15 to -18. Also prefer headroom and dynamics. So thanks for sharing your insights, Michael. Okay. So we see Explorer 7 says to me, thanks, Greg. Very helpful session, my first. So thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you on future live streams. Okay, my chat field just jumped. Okay, so we see in Variaudio question, in Variaudio, what's the best way to do harmony with one voice? So really, it's not done in Variaudio. It's kind of done in conjunction with Variaudio, but we'll show you here. Okay, so I'm going to just derive the chord track from the MIDI part here. So I'll select the piano, and we'll go to chord track, and we'll create chord symbols. All right, so we have our chord symbols, and now all I have to do is let's listen to our vocal. And since we kind of know what the chords are from the piano part, so let's say I just want to take one particular phrase, I'll select that with my range selection tool, come over here to my audio menu and say generate harmonies. And we could do up to 4 harmony voices. Let's just make it 1 per the question. So now as we listen. So that would be all you had to do. So you don't even have to use Variaudio, but just select it. And if you know the chords, then it knows how to generate the harmonies, which you could do from the audio menu. So just select the range with the range tool, like so, and then come right over here, audio, generate harmony voices. So you see a question, should I use disabled instrument tracks in orchestral template or Vienna Pro? So, I've had a lot of my composer friends that have kind of migrated more to disabled tracks instead of kind of hosting lots of instruments offline on other services, playback engines. So, and 3 people I know I've talked to about it kind of migrated to it, said that they wouldn't go back to hosting it offline. So, but either way is a great solution. You can see what works best for you and your system and how much RAM you have. Or you see Michael Pierce have to has to take off. And thanks for joining us. He wants to wish everyone a safe week and just says thanks for all our hard work answering an enormous pile of questions. All right. We'll see you on Friday, hopefully. All right. All right, so we see JVI just saying, thanks, Greg. Q sends question. Okay, but why 4? Great. It's one more than 3. Not sure how to get to 12 with Q send. So, if you needed to send, like every track is going to have 8 sends. These sends could be routed to like an output or to a group, and that group could then be sent to physical outputs as well. So that's how you could do routing through sends in addition to that. Okay, just reading through. All right, so just see, Greg, I've heard the expression that there's almost infinite headroom about a dozen times now. Can you explain that to me? So when we do calculations of our audio engine, like the dynamic range of a CD, I think is 108 dB. The dynamic range of 24-bit audio, I think, is 144 dB, and I could be mistaken on the numbers. But the theoretical limitation of like a 32-bit floating point file is 1592 dB. So within the audio engine, you could, you could clip, you could do all sorts of, processing, but that's why you probably hear about Headroom videos, like Headroom and people describing that. So. All right, so we have Luca joining us from, I believe he's outside of Munich. So thanks for being able to join us today. All right, and I think I am caught up. So let's go to some of the questions that were sent in advance. And again, if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure that you do hit the like button and that you subscribe to the channel. Thank you. I see we're at 141 likes. That's great. All right. All right, so a question that was mailed in. Is it possible to undo a VSTI change made by mistake? Recently, I replaced a plugin preset that I have been editing. I had mistaken the track and replaced it with another plugin. I couldn't find a way to go back unless I run a previous project backup. All right, so let's say if I come here, so I'm not sure if it's an instrument or... So, if I'm here, within the project, if I come here and I add a plugin, so let's say, okay, I want to add a plugin, I move a parameter, I delete the plugin, I want it to go to a different delay, and then I realized I kind of had messed up. There's an undo history for edits, and that's like Control or Command plus Z. So if I come over here, so that's going to affect edits, but not elements within the mix console. So within the mix console, if you hold down Alt or Option Z, or you could just actually come here within the mix console itself. At that point, we have unlimited levels of undo and redo within the mix console. And if we go to our full screen mix console, you could actually see kind of the edit history here. So we can say, okay, I just did my multi-tap delay. I added this plugin. So I want to go back. We added the mod machine. I changed that parameter. I removed that plugin. And then I went to the multi-tap delay and added that. So this edit history for like audio plugins, you could just kind of go back. And I think that will go back until you've closed the computer, but all of the changes you made for, once I come here, I adjust the different parameters, these will all kind of be adjusted directly here. So, okay, I want to move this, so whatever I moved the fader, I adjusted the pan, we can now just kind of come right over here and go back to square one. So give that a try. So Option or Alt plus Z. Okay, we had a question. I was wondering if there's a way to save created rhythmic patterns so I could then assign them on my touch screen to trigger them. So what some people, I guess what you could do if you wanted to trigger different rhythmic patterns, you might, what I was thinking of for this is, if you use Groove Agent. So let's go to like an instrument track here and we'll select Groove Agent. You could have different pattern pads here, and these patterns could be the same note that's, just doing different rhythmic values. So you can drag from your project right onto pads and then be able to trigger these pads from these MIDI note numbers. So it could be from your keyboard controller or like or from a touch screen that's just transmitting a MIDI note that could be triggering this particular instrument sound. And then if you wanted that to trigger, you could use Groove Agent as the input and set the output to another instrument. So that way it's not just limited to being in Groove Agent. It could be assigned to any particular instrument that you want. Okay, we had a question about warp markers. Says, hi, Greg, I've done the following, but I'm not seeing where my warp markers are created. Edited event tempo, enabled musical mode, edited hit points, clicked create warp markers, clicked on audio warp, and I show far fewer warp markers than when I edited hit points. Enabled free warp and the results don't change. All right, so let's take a look. Let me just jump back to our project that we were at. Thanks again for all the wonderful questions that people have asked. Hope everyone's learned something. And if you have, make sure you do hit the like button and that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. Okay, so when I come over here, let's say, all right, so when I double click on our file, we'll go into, let's say, our hit points editor. Okay, so I see my hit points here. Now, in my definition, I won't really, I think, make sure you don't have this set to auto adjust. So I'm just going to turn that off. So I'm going to go to my hit points. So I see my hit points here. All right. And I think, if it looks like maybe you had manual adjust. So I think, and he was kind enough to, or this person was kind enough to send a video. We come over here, we create warp markers, and we go to audio warp and enable free warp, that they would see less. So, one, you probably don't have to have that on musical mode in definition, but when we go to the audio warp, musical mode doesn't have to be turned on. when you do that. But let's say, okay, now when I go to free warp, my process is I just go to my hit points. We have that set. I click on create warp markers, audio warp, and then enable free warp, and all the different warp markers will then show up, so I could move the different events quite easily like that. But I think what you're doing is maybe you have musical mode on before, and check in your definition if you have like the grid set here. You may have the grid set there to quarter notes, and if that is set to auto adjust, you may see fewer kind of hit points as you do that process. So try just making sure your definition tab is also clear. All right, so I know we had a question, I think that was emailed in. Let me see if I could find it. Didn't see if this was Benny's question that was emailed in. So let's see if we could find that really quick before we jump back. Okay, so this is Benny's question is about Wavelab 11. So question, I don't know how to burn a CD in Wavelab 11. Can you please show me in Windows 10? All right, so jump back over to Wavelab. Okay, so I'm gonna just come over and let's just say I'll do a new audio montage. Okay, and I'm gonna set this for stereo 44.1. I want to import audio files. So I'll say browse. Okay, so I'll come here and I just will select all of my audio files. All right, so we'll line these up to tracks, and we can put them all on the active track. Okay, so now once I've done that, I've created a montage, added the files. We can go to your CD, and then we go to, I think we just go to functions. We can say, click on the CD wizard, and now hit apply, and then all of the CD markers have been added for you. And then at this point, you could check if you wanted to, the CD track list is valid. So you could do that and then just come right over here and click to burn the CD or create, I don't have a CD drive, or I can make a DDP image directly there. So start with adding a montage. You could add with stereo. Right click to add the files. Once the files are in, go to the CD tab, and from the CD tab, go to functions and choose CD wizard. That will then put all of the files, all of the markers there for you, as well as give you 2 seconds of pause by default, and you could adjust that in this window, and then you should be all set. So thanks for sending that in, Benny. Let's jump back to our conversation. Okay, just reading through some comments. So I just see from Sable Winters, can we have a special guest for the Friday the 25th Zoom? Can we get Michael Romanowski? So I could reach out to Michael, but I had some other people as well in mind, but Michael would be wonderful. Kind of share some of his insights. He may be busy with Grammy time, but I'll see if we can get a special guest, but we'll look forward to the Zoom. All right, so I think I am at the end of questions. We'll see if there's any more questions. If not, we could wrap up just a little bit early. I'll just wait just a moment and we'll see if there's more questions that kind of pop in. Thanks again for all the questions. We'll be doing this again on Friday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. We see from Mark Rabin, it's snowing in Montana. So, all right, Agent K is giving me a trophy for getting through all the questions. So I appreciate that. Makes me feel extra special. All right. All right, so we see question: the performance on my Threadripper 297X is really bad. It just uses one core. I have to disable hyperthreading to get it to work in an acceptable point. Is there a fix for it? So depending on how you're utilizing it. So, if you're running one instance of, a sampler, and then at that point you're, having a bunch of tracks loaded in, it could be that particular sampler is only utilizing one core, so it could really depend upon your project. So if you could let us know like what type of projects you're doing as well. Okay, if not, I'll wait just another minute, and if not, we'll wrap up because I have another meeting at 5. It's kind of a crazy meeting week. Or starting in 15 minutes, and I have about 16 phone calls to return from the live stream. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I want everyone to stay safe and healthy, and look forward to seeing everyone back on Friday. Appreciate all the likes and appreciate being a part of the community. And thanks to everyone for their help in making the community so great and wonderful. Thank you very much. Have a great day.